Our top story tonight, ladies and gentlemen, in what is a reflection of the Modi government's successful economic decisions, India has officially become the fourth largest economy in the world at $4 trillion. India surpasses Japan in assuming this position, and as per NITI Aayog CEO BVR Subramaniam, the country would become the third largest economy in the next 2.5 to 3 years. Currently, the United States, China and Germany occupy the first, second and third positions respectively. Remember, the International Monetary Fund has consistently predicted India's growth as stable, and now the global agency forecasts India to be the fastest growing major economy in the next 2 years. According to the World Economic Outlook report, the Indian economy is expected to grow by 6.2% in 2025 and 6.3% next year in 2026, which is higher than her global and regional counterparts. In fact, India has come a long way since being considered part of the fragile 5 economies of the world to rising to the top 5 economies of the world in just a decade. But despite domestic and global outlooks predicting overall growth, the opposition doesn't seem to be too happy with this latest achievement. Listen in to some of the reactions that have come in today.
जो मध्यम वर्ग ईएमआई देने के संघर्ष में जूझ रहा हो, उसके बारे में बात कर लें। एमएसएमई सेक्टर के बारे में बात कर लें। 45 साल का बेरोजगारी का जो रिकॉर्ड टूटा है, उसके बारे में बात कर लें। मध्यम वर्ग का जीवन, जरा उस पर चर्चा करिए ना। ये कह देना साहब इससे आगे बढ़ गए, उससे आगे बढ़ गए, सबसे आगे बढ़ गए साहब, लेकिन देशवासियों से तो पूछिए वो कितना आगे हैं, कितना पीछे हैं।
80 करोड़ लोग 5 किलो अनाज में खुश क्यों हैं, उस पर आश्रित क्यों हैं, ये बता दें।
आप समावेशी विकास के सूचकांक पर कहां पाते हैं? असल में क्या होता है ना कि जब आप जीडीपी की साइज पर बात करते हैं तो 5 समृद्धि के टापू असमानता के महासागर की तस्दीक नहीं कर सकते। उसके बारे में क्या टिप्पणी होगी? ये सारी चीजें एक ट्रैजेक्टरी पे चलनी चाहिए।
80 करोड़ 85 करोड़ लोगों को 5 किलो राशन पर एक तरफ जिंदा रखे और दूसरी तरफ की हमारी बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्था है, तो जो धनाढ्य है धन उन्हीं के हाथ में चला गया।
All right, on the broadcast, I'm joined by Sanju Verma of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Rajat Sethi, author and economist, joins us. Advocate Kapil Madan, political analyst, joins us. Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, senior economist, also joins us. Good evening and namaskar to all of you. Sanju Verma, let me begin with you. You heard the opposition question this entire position and say, what does it mean when we talk about $4 trillion when you have unemployment and you have 80 crore people feeding off 5 kg ration? Your response to the opposition?
You know, Shreya, my first response is this. When Prime Minister Narendra Modi took charge at the helm of affairs in 2014, India's GDP was $2.04 trillion. Today we are at $4.3 trillion. In the last 11 years, that works out to a phenomenal 111% growth. And let me say one thing to you, not only in absolute terms, FY22, our GDP growth was 9.7%, FY23, 7.6%, FY24, 9.2%. Now, assuming that we do only 6.2% in FY25, even then, the average GDP growth of the last 4 years works out to 6.17%. And this, when the world is struggling to grow at even 2%. We are all aware of the geopolitical mayhem. But be it as it may, the most important thing which I want to tell the opposition is this. And this is data from IMF. I'm not doffing this data off my hat. The IMF says 17 crore people have been lifted out of poverty by the Modi government in the last decade. And more importantly, the poverty rate has come down from 16.2% from 2013 to barely 2.3% in 2025.
Okay.
And more importantly, just one last point. Those who keep talking about unemployment, let me tell them one thing. In 2018, India's unemployment rate was 5.8%. That fell to 3.2% in 2024. And Shreya, as we speak now, the provisional unemployment rate is at a multi-decade low of 2.1%. And the RBI has said that we added 4.6 crore jobs last year. And the Modi government added 17.9 crore jobs in the last 10 years, with the job growth
Okay,
of
Sanju Verma, let me
36%.
get in Kapil Madan to respond to you. Kapil Madan, you heard Sanju Verma. You've also heard IMF predict sustained, stable growth for the Indian economy. You don't believe your government, you don't believe the BJP, it's fine, but you do believe global agencies when they talk about India being a sustained, stable economy, despite the external headwinds that it has been hit with.
So, let me just give you, some important facts for your viewers. You would recall back in the year 2011 when UPA 2 was in power, there were reports that at that point in time, India was poised to become the third largest economy. And you please do a fact check on me. You will find several reports, articles saying the same thing. Insofar as the data is concerned, if you look at the GDP growth between 2004 to 2014, annual GDP growth was about 7.6%. Again, I will invite my good friend Sanju to do a fact check on me as far as this data is concerned. And if you look at the data from 2014 till now, our average growth is somewhere between 6.5%. So this is insofar as the data is concerned. You can talk about
2004 and 14. Did you have a COVID pandemic and two wars?
Hold on, madam, hold on. Allow me to make my point. In 2008, we have had the worst recession. So please, all these factors, in UPA 1, UPA 2, and in the NDA government also, you had these kind of challenges. And we also, witness in the NDA 1, the demonetization, which apparently, was a disaster because it again pushed our GDP back for a, brief period of time. So this is, the numbers, the data which speak for itself. And I would like to tell our viewers one more thing. While Sanju would want to, give this, 100% growth rate, this is all whimsical. You will have, when you look at the GDP, you look at, how your GDP is being growing year to year. To say that in, 2009, it was at so-and-so in terms of quantification, or what you're trying to do, you're trying to mislead. And one more important point here, while you want to, talk about that we are poised to become the fourth largest economy here, I will ask Sanju here on this show, what is our nominal GDP per capita? So we are...
Okay, Sanju Verma, quickly respond, then I get in Rajat and Dr. Mehrotra into this.
148th position.
Okay, Sanju Verma, go ahead.
Okay, Shreya, let me make one thing very clear. The average GDP growth from 2004 to 2014 under the Congress was not 7.6%. It was barely 6.1%. Because remember one thing, that the Congress never changed the base year. And it kept the base year, at 2004-5 prices for the longest time, whereas globally the convention is that you need to have a rolling base year, and GDP is always calculated based on GDP at market prices. GDP at market prices is GDP at factor cost plus indirect taxes minus subsidies. The Congress never used the GDP at market prices formula. As per that, the average GDP growth of the Modi government is more than 7.7%. The GDP at market prices formula, if you use that, the Congress's GDP growth for the decade of 2004 to 2014 was not even 6.2%. But my most important point before I end is only this. I say, look at what is happening on the ground. Today we are selling more than 14 to 15 lakh motorcycles every month. We are selling 5 to 6 lakh scooters every month. Maruti Suzuki is selling 1.7 lakh cars every month, which is 5 cars every minute.
Okay.
We are selling more than 1 lakh tractors every month. Mahindra and Mahindra is selling more than 47,000 tractors every month. So the limited point is this. If you look at what is happening on the ground, and my last point, Shreya, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the State Bank of India's numbers, which is a proxy to the larger economy. The State Bank of India in FY25 posted a net profit of 71,000 crore, the best that it has ever done since its inception, more than 5 to 6.
Okay, let me get in Dr. Santosh Mehrotra into this. Dr. Mehrotra, somebody who has, an understanding of economics, and this is something that the opposition has been talking about. Karti Chidambaram had even tweeted about it, saying this is all something that can be hyped, but look at the per capita numbers. When we talk about the indicators of economic growth, Sure, per capita income is one of the factors, but there are other factors as well. When we talk about GDP, when we talk about capex, inflation, how do you then see this entire situation?
Sure, thank you for inviting me on the show. Let me just make very quickly 5 points. Firstly, I think we need to congratulate ourselves that we've gotten there. However, the fact of the matter is that we could have gotten there much earlier had we continued to grow at the rate of 7.8% per annum at factor cost as we had grown over the period from 2004-14. At factor cost, the growth rate of the government of the period from 14 to 24 has been 5.8%. In other words, it's been 2 percentage points lower. So just let's keep in mind that we could have been the third biggest economy several years ago had we continued to grow at 2 percentage points higher. Point 2. I think this point has been made briefly, but I actually looked at the per capita income numbers at market exchange rates of India and where the India's rank was. India's rank is not third, but 149th in the world of 180 plus countries. 149. Let's just keep this in mind. We are a relatively poor country. We are doing much better. Yes, it is true, and this is my third point, that we are, for the last 3 years or so, the fastest growing large economy. But Shreya, we were, for the last 20 years or so, the second fastest growing large economy in any case.
Okay.
And I want to remind your viewers that it's only because China slowed. Fourthly, let's just remember that if we want to become Viksit Bharat by 2047, we have to grow at 8% per annum. You just told us that the growth rate has been is likely to be 6.2% in FY25, and in 26 it will be 6.3. And none of the IMF, World Bank, OECD, none of them project for India until 2030 a growth rate more than 6.5. Now, if you need to grow at 8%, how are you going to do that? And final point, if I may, the poverty rate that was just mentioned by a previous speaker, let me just remind you that that estimate is not by the IMF. It's a paper by India's executive director, India's nominee at the IMF.
Okay.
And that's
Sanju
a
Verma, will you respond, then I'll get Rajat Sethi into this.
Broad paper. Anyway.
Shreya, my simple point is this. Anyone with an IQ of even 40 knows that we had the worst pandemic in over 100 years, the COVID-19 2020 pandemic, which was a black swan event. Then we had the Russia-Ukraine conflict, another black swan event. Despite 2 black swan events, if you take the GDP growth of FY22, FY23 and FY24, our average GDP growth is 8.83%. So my limited point is, show me one economy which is growing at 8% plus despite geopolitical mayhem, despite the COVID pandemic, despite the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And my last point, Shreya, is this. I want to say something for the benefit of your audience. GDP, people say, oh, it's a top-down number. I'm asking a simple question. Everybody who was talking about inflation, what is the inflation number? Retail inflation in April 2025, 3.16%. What is food inflation? 1.78%. What is vegetable inflation? Minus 10.9%. What is pulses inflation? Minus 5.3%. What is our forex reserve? 608.
Okay, Dr. Mehrotra, before I let you respond, let me get in Rajat Sethi into this as well. Rajat, would you consider the external headwinds and global factors that the world is grappling with as something that has influenced Indian economy, or would you completely negate them?
I mean, how can you negate that? That would be intellectual dishonesty. There are always, you do not exist on Mars, right? You are here, the pulls and pressures of global trade impacts you. The world isn't as open to global free trade the way it was in 2004 to 14. There is a more nationalistic overdrive right now where countries like America are trying to manufacture in-house instead of, looking at creating more manufacturing places around the world other than China. So there are pressures which were not there in 2004 to 2014. So you cannot ignore all of those things. However, one needs to understand that all milestones in an economic journey needs to be celebrated without your cynical lenses. It is not like the poverty rate or the Gini coefficient was hunky-dory and absolutely nobody was poor in this country from 2004 to 2014, and suddenly everybody has become poor and everybody's surviving on government doles of ration. It's not like that. Country is steadily progressing. RBI has called India's scenario as Goldilocks scenario, which means you balance out inflation and growth. If you overheat the economy, you grow at 8-9%. Look at the corresponding inflation numbers. Who does inflation hurt the most? Why did UPA was kicked out of power? The central reason was inflation. Their inflation was 12%, 13%. It was breaking the back of poor. It was that reason why they were kicked out of power. It was not because of the glossy numbers that they were projecting.
But Rajat, one of the arguments that the opposition gives is the fact that inflation still remains, the poor is getting poorer, the wealthy are getting wealthier, and that cash distribution, wealth distribution is only among the top few.
Incorrect, Shreya. That is also factually incorrect. Look at the Gini coefficient. It is improving. So you have to go by data instead of going with a broad brush rhetoric.
Okay.
And we cannot have like cynical laughters out here. Let's talk on data. Look at how things have managed. Of course, COVID was an outlier event. Things change in COVID. But you need to look at the broad trends. Look at the labor force participation. Look at the labor force participation during UPA times and do a comparison. The UPA days in 2011, around that time, the labor force participation. I mean, is he a professor? He's acting like a clown out there, sitting and reacting.
Dr. Mehrotra, what is it that is making you laugh so much?
Why is he hysterical? You've gotten too old to have a rational discussion also.
And I haven't made a single personal remark. If I started becoming personal, he will be very uncomfortable. First, Shreya, this is not about you and me. This is about the country. Can we just return to the subject on hand? And people should stop interrupting. Thank you for giving me the floor.
I did not.
2 points. He cannot shut up. He cannot shut up. He finds it absolutely impossible.
Rajat Sethi and Dr. Mehrotra, let's speak one at a time. Dr. Mehrotra, Rajat, I'll come to you. Dr. Mehrotra, please make your point.
Thank you, ma'am. Firstly, yes, of course, there was a COVID pandemic. We know that. But we also know how badly COVID pandemic was managed. All independent studies have come to the conclusion that over 25% of all the people who died in COVID in the world, 16 million died in total, 4.5 million died in our country. There were dead bodies, flowing through the Ganga. We know all that. And let's just remember the management of the COVID crisis was through lockdowns rather than the health interventions that were needed, because our health sector was simply unprepared. And the lockdowns had the impact of contracting
the entire world was unprepared for COVID. So let's just give credit where it's due. There were certain things that were done and people were taken by surprise, by shock when COVID had hit the entire world. So entire healthcare systems of countries have even collapsed. India was still much better than a lot of European countries.
The fiscal and monetary stimulus was so appallingly designed that the result was...
We did not have 45 million deaths during COVID. Are you senile?
Okay, Sanju, let him make his point. I'll come to you.
I should have heckled both of them because they cannot keep their mouth shut and listen to other people. So let me finish my sentence, if I may. The fiscal and monetary policy stimulus, Shreyaji, was such that it led to a contraction of the economy, and the global contraction was 3.1%. Our economy contracted by nearly twice as much, 5.8%. Why? Can any of the two speakers who have been heckling me answer that question? They can't
let them respond, Dr. Mehrotra, let them respond. Sanju, first you, and then I'll come to you, Rajat.
Shreya, as Rajat said, I pity the students of Mr. Mehrotra. He's not fit to be a professor. He's become senile. You're a senile gentleman who's playing with data to, suit your convenient roots. Let me say one thing. 45 lakh people, that is what you said, 4.5 million people died during COVID in India. You have to be senile to be talking such gibberish on national television. Let me say one thing to you, Shreya. Today, our Sensex is just shy of 82,000. We've risen by 228% in terms of the Sensex trajectory from the COVID lows. But Mr. Mehrotra does not see that upsurge in the Sensex. Today, rupee is one of the best performing Asian currencies. But Mr. Mehrotra does not see that. In the last 3 years, our average GDP growth is 8.83%. But Mr. Mehrotra does not see that. Our retail inflation is 3.16%. But Mr. Mehrotra does not see that. Our food inflation is 1.78%. But Mr. Mehrotra does not see that. Our unemployment rate is only 2.1%. But Mr. Mehrotra does not see that. We added 4.6 crore jobs last year. But Mr. Mehrotra does not see that. Mr. Mehrotra spoke about per capita income. But Mr. Mehrotra did not tell you that the per capita household debt of the United States is this. Every US citizen has a debt on his or her head of more than $127,000.
Okay.
Whereas the per capita household debt of India is less than 23%.
Okay,
That number is
okay,
more
Rajat
than
Sethi, go ahead, make your point. I have
128%
paucity of time. I have to take all reactions. Dr. Mehrotra.
I just wanted to point out one point that during COVID, it was India's economic handling which was appreciated by everybody around the world. It was the World Bank and the IMF, and they independently evaluated because India did not go into the advice by these armchair economists, so-called, who had ruined India's economy and made it fragile by 2012, 2014. And this individual sitting here was part of that game. This guy sitting here used to advocate around 2000, 2021 that India should print money, print and distribute. That was the kind of advice these buggers were actually giving. And let me tell you, sir, stop it. Shut up. Allow others to speak. I'll tell you, Shreya, it was India's economy which did not opt for printing money and starting to distribute around. Look at what America did. They had historic inflation numbers. Biden couldn't even control the economy for several years and eventually lost power. The same thing happened with UK, Japan, European powers. Everybody had breakneck inflation numbers because they chose the path of these armchair economists. They followed the path of printing money. And look at where their economies are now. See, we need to give credit where it is due.
Okay.
However, I will still go out and say, Shreya, that there are headwinds. There are serious technological headwinds, and our important sectors will have to reorient themselves and re-strategize themselves in order to meet the challenges. Therefore, we have to be committed, constantly work in order to meet the objectives.
Okay, I think there are concerns and they will remain, and it will take time. Dr. Mehrotra, I think as an economist, you will also agree that it takes time for economies to become stable and grow, and that we can't completely reject what India has achieved today. I have paucity of time, Sanju Verma. I'll leave it here. Thank you very much to all of you, Dr. Mehrotra, Advocate Kapil Madan, Sanju Verma, as well as Rajat Sethi for joining us on Times Now and sharing your perspective. That, ladies and gentlemen, is all about the fourth largest economy in the world that India has become. Of course, the opposition upping the ante against the government, questioning the government on this. But the fact of the matter is that numbers and statistics don't lie. And right in front of you is India's reality, the reality of the Indian economy, that it has certainly become a $4 trillion economy, the fourth largest in the world. We're slipping into a short break. News and updates will continue on the other side.